Thank you very much, Vivi. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from Washington, D.C. on this beautiful morning here. I'm so delighted to join all of you along with my colleague Holy-Tiana and many other colleagues from the PEFA Secretariat to talk about PEFA and PEFA Climate. The way we are going to do this is in two parts. The first part, I would do PEFA in a nutshell. It's a briefer one, and more time we devote to PEFA Climate, which my colleague Holly Tiana would be taking through. And as Vivi mentioned, we would be very glad to take some questions. Next slide, please. So friends, for those of you who do not know PEFA, PEFA is Public Expenditure and Financial Accountability, as mentioned by Vivi. So what's this PEFA? In simple terms, PEFA is a partnership of several partners who came together to create a public financial management diagnostic framework. So PEFA is a methodology for assessing the PFM systems. What are PFM systems? The budget systems. So budget preparation, budget execution, and budget evaluation. So to assess that, the PEFA framework came up, and it's now being used in 155 countries. We have more than 800 PEFA assessments worldwide that are done so far. Next slide, please. So as you would have seen from the logos below, it's a partnership of several partners and it's housed in the World Bank. The partners include IMF, European Commission, and several bilaterals. And what the PEFA framework does is the convergence of governments and partners behind one framework to assess PFM systems. So that's the reason why we treat it as the gold standard PFM framework, which is acceptable across countries, across organizations. The key aspects I would want you to pick up is it's evidence based, and many of you understand would be accountants and finance background, so you would understand very well when I say specific point of time. That's like the balance sheet. So PFM system takes a snapshot at a particular point of time based on the evidence available. So that's the whole approach. What does it do? It tries to assess how PFM impacts the key budgetary outcomes. What are the budget outcomes? Aggregate fiscal discipline, resource allocation, and efficient service delivery. These three are known as the budget outcomes, and PIFA assesses that. And it enables a foundation for analyzing and improving PFM performance. So what you do is PIFA assessment is done in 1 year, and it is over time, it is repeated after 3-4 years. So progress is measured, and every year you can pick up some indicators and assess the progress. So one key aspect highlighted for the information of everyone, PIFA doesn't assess government policies. That's one of the reasons also probably of the objective and independent nature, evidence-based nature. So who conducts the assessments? Governments themselves conduct the assessment of PIFA assessment, either as a self-assessment or along with other partners. We in the PEFA Secretariat, we do not conduct assessments. We maintain the framework, and we enable trainings and quality assurance to issue a quality check. So the assessments are primarily owned by governments, and that enhances credibility of the assessments as such. So the key point is that it doesn't assess the government policies as such. Next slide, please. So how does it work? So the three outcomes I mentioned: aggregate fiscal discipline, strategic allocation of resources, and efficient service delivery. This is operationalized through 7 pillars. The 7 pillars which you saw in the previous slide in the side as a picture, we'll come to that again later, which are further distinguished into 31 indicators. Each pillar has several indicators under it. Each indicator can have one or more dimensions into it. So in simple terms, PIFA assesses PFM systems on 94 dimensions or 94 measuring points. These measuring points would each of them will pick up and assess the PFM on that particular aspect on a scale of A to D. C being the basic level of performance, and B and A being higher, and D being lower than the basic level of performance. Now, if I said there are 155 countries where PFAS are used, can anyone guess if we aggregate, if we add up all these assessments and try to get a kind of a rough global score? It's not expected to be added, but arithmetically, if you add, where do you come? You come to roughly a kind of a C, a basic level of performance, which means essentially PFM systems have the basic level of performance across, and there would be variations. Some countries on some parameters doing well, but it also indicates significant scope for improvement. That's the kind of a global picture on how PFM systems are working. Next slide, please. This is the budget cycle of PEFA. So the whole PEFA indicate the pillars are represented in this. And if you see, the budget reliability is shown towards the right of the slide. What does this really mean? It simply means every other pillar essentially contributes to the aggregate fiscal discipline or budget reliability. What does PFM systems aspire to do? To make budgets well, execute budgets well, and evaluate budgets well. So essentially it is about the budget reliability, and you have all other pillars contributing to it, some in terms of independent ones and some as cross-cutting aspects, as we see in the center: transparency of public finances and management of assets and liabilities. Next slide. Thanks, Holy-Tiana. Now, let me quickly run you through the 31 indicators and dimensions. I'll not cover all of them as such. So just for a snapshot as such. So the first pillar, budget reliability. Here we are talking of, is the government spending money as per its plan, the aggregate at an aggregate level, and at a composition level? Do ministries get the funding as per the budget originally approved? Does the actual spend and original approved at not just at aggregate level but at ministry level and various composition level work well? That's what the budget reliability talks about, and also the revenue outturn as such. Then the second pillar goes through the transparency in public finances, how transparent public finances are. For example, if you take PI, what we talk as performance indicator, PI6, central government operations outside the financial reports. So how much it is it very significant, and how does that affect the budget process? Or public access to fiscal information in PI9, how is budget documentation itself in PI5? So these aspects put together, you talk about the transparency in public finances. Then we have this pillar on management of assets and liabilities. How well public investments take place, how well assets are managed, how is debt management, that kind of an issues. Then you have a pillar on policy-based fiscal strategy on budgeting. So it talks into like, how does the macroeconomic and fiscal forecasting influence the budget process? Do you have a fiscal strategy? How is budget prepared, and how is the legislature approving the budget? These kind of areas go into the policy-based fiscal strategy pillar. The biggest pillar is the predictability and control of budget execution, or it's rather the budget execution. Here you get all the how revenues are collected, how predictable is allocation, in-year resource allocation, how are expenditure areas, payroll controls, internal audit. So all the aspects which are in the control of the treasury and the line ministries for execution of budget. Then we come to the budget evaluation, which links also to the accounting and reporting, and then external scrutiny and audit. Accounting including, are in-year budget reports produced, annual financial reports produced using some credible standards, how is audit conducted? So, and then how is the legislature dealing with the audit reports? This is somewhat like a bigger picture of the whole cycle. Now, I have spent quite significant part of my career in supreme audit institutions. So in India, in Oman, and in the United States, and worked with several other SAIs globally. So always I had this concern or question for myself when I started working on PEFA: how does PFM systems work with SAIs? So at a bigger level, if you look at it, everything on the screen you see is related directly or indirectly and is an area of interest to SAIs, because SAIs are a key stakeholder. One, SAI is an aspect of PFM, and then SAI has the overall responsibility to support the Ministry of Finance through audit products in ensuring strong public financial management systems as such. So that's at a bigger picture level, that everything in PFM is interesting to SAI. But we try to unpack that a little bit more into more tangible things which SAIs can further focus. Can we go to the next slide, please, Holy-Tiana? Now, this slide picks few indicators, and I'll spend a couple of minutes on this. So this slide essentially says there are three types of indicators. And if you click once more, Holy-Tiana, or twice, yeah. So let me start with the two highlighted ones. There are some which are direct focus of SAIs. For example, external audit. What is it? It's all about supreme audit institutions, how the audits are conducted, how independent the SAI is. And then there is another called PI8, which is performance information in service delivery. So for service delivery, what was that? Why is it also directly related to SAI? Because PEFA score to the government is influenced or comes through the level of performance audits on service delivery that are being conducted by supreme audit institutions. The performance audit itself is a measure there to in this particular dimension of PI8. Those are the two super direct for the SAIs. Then you have others which we call as definition, where it is defined definition aspects. Let's take annual financial report. So what's an annual financial report is something which you would have mentioned like into like how well the annual financial report is submitted to audit. That's in dimension 2. So is it submitted within 3 months to audit? So audit becomes directly a part of this indicator as such on annual financial reports. Similarly, in fiscal risk reporting, that's in the PI 10 as such. So you have the financial reports, for example, compilation of public corporations, the information compilation from financial corporation, which is a triangulation matter. And the second one is the audited financial statements. Here it's again a definition issue, which means the SAI is directly related in the process at a definition level. Then the rest of the aspects that you see, I'll touch just a couple of examples for an idea. These we call as triangulation. What does triangulation mean? It means size information is triangulated with other sources of information for assessment of PFM score here. Say, for example, the scores on internal audit. So the internal audit related score would get influenced by the internal audit itself, the SAI, how it views the internal audit, and how internal audits are conducted with from accountant general and ministry of other other ministry of finance sources as such. Similarly, payroll audits, it's again a triangulation of information, how well payroll audits are being conducted, whether by SAI or others, but it's the information basis as such. So it is in a nutshell, what we are here presenting is like that's the framework itself, which we call the PEFA main framework, as distinct from the PEFA supplementary framework on PEFA climate, which Holy-Tiana will speak. This itself has at a broad level, everything is related to SAI, and then there are at varying levels of detail where SAI is related. SAI's work is influenced or related to aspects of from PEFA. So what do we recommend? We recommend from PEFA Secretariat that SAIs make use extensively the PEFA reports which are already existing. So to read and determine the audit programs for SAIs on PFM matters. Two, SAIs can themselves conduct PFM assessments, pick aspects, the framework, it's already done. One need not reinvent the process. So the benchmark is already with a global consensus determined. pick from there for conducting an audit of PFM systems in your respective countries, and it all adds up pretty well. That's on the first part on PEFA in a nutshell, and we'll always be glad to connect with you, and I look forward to question and answers, and I'll turn to Holy-Tiana for the second section.
Many thanks, Srini. What I might add for that first part, and it's valid in fact for everything else, is that PEFA reports, for those that are public, you can access them on the PEFA website, and so it will give you also an idea of what it looks like. And maybe I should have started by introducing myself. I'm Holy-Tiana Rame from the PEFA Secretariat, and I've been with the Secretariat since 2013. So the second part of the presentation is linked to PEFA Climate. So Srini briefly mentioned the long name of PEFA Climate, which is the supplementary framework for assessing climate responsive PFM. And we never use that name, and we refer to PEFA Climate. What is PEFA Climate? It's like PEFA, a PFM tool first. And it focuses here on how well the PFM systems support the implementation of government climate change policies. It builds on the PEFA framework and has the features that Srini presented earlier. However, while PEFA framework provides high-level overview of how PFM systems work, so the way Srini just described, PEFA Climate is using a more granular approach, focusing on climate expenditure and revenue, like a magnifying glass would do. PEFA Climate is undertaken at the request of a government. It works exactly as the same as what Srini explained for PEFA 2016. But it requires a mix of PFM and climate change expertise. Because we saw, and I'll come back to that in a minute, when we conducted pilots, that in fact it works really well when the assessment team comprises both expertise. The findings of the assessment are summarized in a PEFA Climate Assessment Report, and exactly as for the PEFA 2016 reports, when the government authorizes the publication, you will be able to find those reports in the PEFA website. PEFA Climate was released for piloting in 2020. And it was a deliverable of the coalition of the Ministry of Finance for Climate Action under the High Principle 4 back in 2020. Before diving into more specific details, we wanted to have just a pause on the semantic and why PEFA Climate, why not PEFA Environment, or why not Green PEFA? The focus of PEFA Climate is rooted in the implementation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And it focuses really on the implementation of mitigation and adaptation policies that countries have put in place. And we have that question often for countries that have a broader green agenda, pertaining also to biodiversity and or to desertification, they can still apply PEFA Climate as long as climate mitigation and adaptation are part of such agenda. So everything that I will present from now on is really focused on climate change only, and then hence the name of PEFA Climate. About piloting. I mentioned that PEFA Climate was launched in 2020, and when we started, we thought as PEFA Climate as a standalone, as a tool for a standalone assessment focusing only on PFM and climate change. So that's what you see on the right hand side of the screen. And so it started in 2020, 2021, and early 2022 with, in fact, that way of undertaking an assessment with reports. The first assessment was conducted in Samoa, and then you see there were 3 other assessments like this, and actually, and all members of the Intosai WGEA are in here bolded and in italic, so you can see right away which countries in your group undertook a PEFA climate assessment. So standalone assessment for 4 countries. But what happened is that PEFA climate was also undertaken as part of a bundle of assessment, which means with PEFA, so PEFA, the version of 2016, but also, and more at the same time as PEFA and PEFA Gender, which is another supplementary framework that the PEFA program is handling. So we wanted to know, and this is why we extended the pilot phase, what would come out, in fact, of a report that would combine 2 or 3 assessments, before wrapping up the assessment. So you see the names of the published the countries that undertook and for which the reports are public. And then we still have ongoing assessment in some countries, but the piloting phase is now over. If we go to the key elements of the assessment, you recognize something that Trini already presented. We use the same 7 pillars. Here we have 14 specific indicators and 29 further down, broken down into 29 dimensions. The same as for PEFA, it's evidence-based. It means that before, when the report refers to a specific score, it means the report will describe which evidence has been used, among which some pertain to reports that were put together by supreme audit institutions, for instance. PEFA Climate is also developed a toolkit. I'll come back to that in a minute. And the novelty compared to other PEFA products is the introduction of what we call an inception questionnaire that enables to create the country climate change profile. I'll come back to that in a minute, but before moving forward, I would like to specify what PEFA Climate considers when it comes to SAI, exactly what as Srinivas before explains about how PEFA 2016 considers the role of SAI. Specifically for PEFA Climate, we consider the mandate that SAIs have to provide independent external oversight and report on the economy, the efficiency, and the effectiveness of government efforts to implement climate change policies. This can take different forms. So it can be through a cross-cutting theme in performance audit, but it can also take the form of specific audits of entities, of projects, of programs, or a whole of a government approach when it comes, for instance, to audit of SDGs. And then, of course, for some of the elements, we also consider the role of SAI when it comes to the audit of financial reports. So it's pretty much the same as what Srini explained for PEFA 2016, but it's in that specific case more focused on the performance audit. So coming back to the specifics of PEFA Climate, the questionnaire was developed so it's a novelty, in fact, in PEFA Climate. Srini mentioned that PEFA does not assess policy. PEFA Gender and PEFA Climate follows the exact same rule. Still, when we developed PEFA Climate, we bumped into that. The first thing we bumped into was I would say, the disconnection between what is called long-term or medium-term in climate change and the way it is handled in public financial management, where the medium term goes from 3 to 5 years maximum. And so the questionnaire was one way of reconciling, in fact, those elements. So what is in that questionnaire? We start with international commitments that a country may have when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation. And then we come back to the UNF 3C. This is handled in section 1. We see right after how these commitments are translated into national level strategies and policies. It may be the other way around. The national level strategies and policies are translated into international commitments. Doesn't matter. The PEFA Climate would capture that the exact same way. And then we have a look at how PFM kicks in. So meaning how these policies are translated into the PFM systems. So the budget aspects of that, medium term, annually, the subsidies, the transfers to operators. And what we call operators in PEFA Climate are the entities that are in charge, in addition to the central government, in charge of implementing climate change policies and strategies defined at the central level. One of the main elements of the questionnaire is the fact that it asks the government how the government is defining what they consider as climate change expenditure. So it's not neutral because it sets the stage, and this is why we use the questionnaire as the starting point for the country climate, what we call the country climate profile. The country climate profile is inserted in the report. For SAI, the questionnaire could be, in fact, the starting point to collect information on how climate change policies and strategies, and then the linkage to PFM is organized. It gives excellent hint that you may find about the coordination between stakeholders or lack of, because the questionnaire for PEFA Climate is to be filled in before the assessment starts, and this must be filled in by the government. It is inserted in the report as well, so I would say automatically, if you open the report and you see that the questionnaire was not filled in, it might be that the counterpart didn't have an idea about how to fill in, because some questions they are really on climate change, some questions they are really on the strategies and policy, and then some are on the PFM, more on the PFM aspects of it. So you have all stakeholders that should be involved in filling in the questionnaire, which sometimes doesn't happen. So it gives hints to supreme audit institutions on various things. So if we go to how the indicators were developed. Here also I will have a specific, I will take examples as Srini did on some indicators that may help, in fact, SAI in the work that they are doing. And then there is a second slide, more specific, exactly as we did for the first part, on how PEFA Climate handles SAI performance and how it assesses it, and how PEFA Climate is also using information coming from SAI. So for the first part, about the 14 indicators. Any of these indicators could be used by SAI depending on the focus of the work they are doing, exactly as for PEFA. The first indicator is bridging, which is called budget alignment with climate change strategies, is bridging the questionnaire with the assessment part of PEFA Climate. It assesses whether climate-related sector medium-term strategic plans, the medium-term budget, the annual budgets are aligned with the climate change strategies. It is useful for SAI because it could help in collecting information on the coherence between the objectives that the government set and the means that the government is using for the implementation of those objectives. The second indicator is essential in PEFA Climate, but would be also very useful to SAI. It deals with what we call tracking, climate-related expenditure, tracking in PEFA Climate relating to the ability of a government to identify, to classify, and to monitor climate expenditure. It's useful to SAI because in this indicator, we come back, and that's one of the first elements we have a look at the definition of climate-related expenditure. You remember I mentioned that's one of the main elements of the questionnaire. We bring this in the assessment as well, and it's the first element in indicator number 2. If there is no definition, it means the score of this indicator would be D. It does not mean that a government cannot use the rest of PEFA Climate because there are other ways of undertaking, even without a proper definition that the whole government would agree on when it comes to climate-related expenditure. It's interesting because you have in here elements pertaining to how a government would disclose climate-related expenditure in their budget, in their in-year reports, in their end-of-year reports. You have also information on climate, in the scope on climate expenditure, but also on expenditure that is counter to climate policy. You would also have information on the transfers that the government is doing towards operators for them to implement the policy. And then there is a specific element on tagging, and you see the differentiation that PEFA Climate is doing when it comes to tracking versus tagging. A tag is one way of tracking, and that's not the only way. And the tag being a specific marker that you would use in your budget classification or budget execution classification, and it's only one of the elements of indicator number 2. So plenty of information that SAIs would be able to rely on and have, I would say, as for one, in a snapshot, information that would help in the audit they are and in the work they are doing on climate change. Then we come to climate responsive budget circular. and about the specific provisions that would be existing in a budget circular. We have a specific indicator on the legislative scrutiny, ex ante, first dimension, ex post, the second one. Then PEFA Climate is screening cross-cutting issues. First, the public investment management, then asset management with a focus on non-financial asset management, the liabilities with one specific element on the fiscal risks that are arising from climate-related contingent liabilities, and then the debt management. Another cross-cutting issue is procurement, which is an element I will come back to in a minute. PEFA Climate is also having a look at compliances aspects. First of the revenue with specifically a focus on tax, so climate related tax, and then climate related expenditure. There is one specific zoom on one type of operator, which are the subnational governments, because of the very specific roles they are playing in the implementation of policies. Then there are the elements of on performance information and on evaluation. And the last indicator is pertaining to expenditure outturned for climate activities. You remember Srini talked about the budget reliability. In here for SAI, which will help, in fact, it's a snapshot between what was planned and authorized by the legislature and then what the implementation is looking like at the aggregate level, and then at the detail level. So I would say in one indicator, you would see the deviation on the implementation of climate activities, looking at the budget execution compared to a budget preparation. So if we have a specific focus on how PEFA Climate handles, and so how the indicators and dimensions are handling the work of SAI. Exactly as for PEFA, there is one indicator focusing, for which there is a specific focus for PEFA Climate, so two of them, sorry. The evaluation, and so evaluation of expenditure and evaluation of taxes. And because the focus today was more on PEFA Climate, I highlighted in here the specific feature that we are looking at, and the presentation will be shared, so you will be able to have a look at what I'm referring to. For the expenditure, it's the evaluation of climate-related program and activities. For the taxes is the contribution of the tax policy to climate change, fully under the purview of SAIs when they undertake performance evaluation, performance audit, sorry. And then I mentioned subnational governments. SAIs may have also a specific performance audit on the evaluation of the implementation of subnational mandates and competencies in light of what the central government decided that the subnational government should implement. Then the approach for the other indicators that are highlighted in this slide are exactly the same as what we had for PEFA 2016. The work of SAI is shaping in fact, how some of the dimensions are working. So, for instance, for the legislative scrutiny, a legislator would scrutinize audit reports that SAI would produce on end-of-year financial reports, or legislator would also scrutinize audit and evaluation reports emanating from SAIs, and could even provide recommendations that were issued by SAIs in the first place. And so I mentioned for indicator number 8 on procurement. The last element is on the evaluation, and here we triangulate the information using evaluation report on the performance of climate responsive procurement that SAI would likely be producing, and the same SAI would likely produce a report on the compliance with procedures and rules that had required emergency procurement. It means in the work on the compliance, I would certainly have a look at how emergency procurement had taken place in a country, and then would produce a report that then PEFA Climate assessment team would be able to rely on to triangulate information during the assessment. So those are examples, but the full list is here on this slide, and you will be able to have a look in the work if you want to consult further. Just to give you an idea of what an indicator looks like. We always, so they all look like the same, no matter PEFA 2016, PEFA Gender, or PEFA Climate. We always have the indicator number. So for PEFA Climate, we use the acronym for Climate Responsive Public Financial Management, hence CRPFM, the number of the indicator. Here we talk about evaluation. We explain, and that's a feature that we added after the piloting. Now that we are finalizing, why it matters to government. You always have a guiding question, a short description of what the indicator is about, and then what you see on the right-hand side. So for indicator number 13, there are 2 dimensions. You may remember from the previous slide. Evaluation of expenditure, evaluation of revenue. The score that is given at the dimension level. That's the lowest level, so the score is given there. And then to come up with the score of the indicator, there is a table that is provided in the framework on how you aggregated, let's say, a B and a C, or a C and a D. The table gives you the score. You will need to refer to the table. The requirements, you have examples here. So for instance, for the climate-related evaluation of expenditure, the minimum requirements are that evaluation of climate-related programs and activities has been carried out at least once in the last 3 years, because here the time period this specific indicator is looking at are the last 3 completed fiscal years. It may go with 1 year only. We are looking backwards, so it would be a last completed fiscal year. It could be at the time of assessment. It could be last 3 completed fiscal years. For PEFA Climate, this is the timeline we are looking at, and you see the difference with the timeline that climate change considers 25 years and beyond. The coverage is specified also, budgetary central government. It could be central government as well. The dimension would specify that. And then you have the description and specific elements that help in the assessment, what we call the dimension measurement guidance. All dimensions, all indicators look like this. I talked about a toolkit. PEFA Climate is a knowledge product, and we inserted here different elements that could help in the assessment, but also that could help SAIs in the work they are doing. Reference to existing guidance documents in here. So we use that indicator by indicator. like the first box here is in indicator 1. We refer to the how-to from the IMF, a document from OECD, IMF, EU, or UNDP, but there are others. And then the second example is an example that is inserted in indicator 2 on climate change budget tagging, resulting from research from the World Bank. Another category for knowledge product, we use the country examples that most of them are derived from what we have in PEFA Climate reports. For instance, in indicator 2, climate budget tagging in Indonesia, and indicator 14, the input from Samoa. And I will come back to that just in a minute. I would just like to present one example of what countries are doing. So countries are assessing those 14 indicators. Those are the scores that for the Samoa report, the report is public. It's the first time assessment, and like you see a lot of these. Does this matter? Maybe not, because, or maybe yes, it depends on, because countries do not start from scratch. It depends on the PFM strategy that they already developed or that they are developing. Some countries are using PEFA Climate at the same time as PEFA, as I mentioned. So it means that PEFA Climate gives hints, gives entry points for countries to consider how they could go further on the things they are already doing or on the things they put on their PFM reform strategy to embed also the climate change aspects. That's what Samoa did. For the assessment, what happened, and that's item number 4, they don't have a definition. If you have a look at the report, you will see that. But the government decided with the assessment team to use the CPEIR, so the Climate Public Expenditure and Institutional Review. That was done a few years before the assessment, so meaning ex post, and to update it and to use it as a starting point to do the PEFA assessment. I mentioned you do not necessarily need a definition to do it. And then they decided also to go one step further, to use what was done during the PEFA Climate as an information, as an input for the budget preparation. That's element number 4. The 3 other elements as entry points that Samoa used is they don't have a climate tax. They wanted to see the possibilities to develop one. They worked already partially on public investment, but not as much as they could. So they wanted to improve their public investment practices to incorporate climate change elements in the selection, the appraisal, but also in the prioritization of the activities. And then I mentioned, that they wanted to use the CPEIR for the budget preparation. They would like, in fact, to use those elements and to have a budget circular that is more climate sensitive. I will stop here. There are other elements and other examples that you will be able to refer to in the presentation we will share. With this, I leave the floor to questions. Over.
Thank you so much, Holy-Tiana, and thank you, Srini, as well for the introduction. Really wonderful presentations. I'm just checking the Q&A box. I don't see anything yet there, so feel free to type in any questions you might have. But while we're waiting, I would just like to ask if Brazil, if I think I saw Rafael here, if you would like to comment on shortly on this topic, because we have this initiative of Brazil on Climate Scanner, where we have developed these metrics to assess government's climate action. So would you like to kind of reflect a little bit the Climate Scanner metrics to this PEFA climate framework?
Hello, I'm here. I'm Rafael, as Vivi mentioned. I work at SAI Brazil, and as we are chairing to SAI, we are developing a project called the Climate Scanner with the support of the WGAA to assess government's action regarding climate. It was very good to see here some of the connections with the PEFA Climate, especially some of the indicators. We could see like indicator 1 and 2 mainly. They're quite connected with one of the kind of assessments that we are doing in the climate finance axis. The Climate Scanner project is divided in three axes: governance, public policies, and finance. And in the finance axis, we could see the connections. Also, the questionnaire that you mentioned touches on some of the points that are in our assessment too. I have, so I'll leave the link here if people want to know something more about the Climate Scanner. I'll leave the link here in the chat. I'd like to ask two very simple questions. Who are the people that do the assessments? If a country asks to run the PEFA Climate in their countries, and the second question would be how much effort or how much work hours, as said, maybe it's kind of difficult because it depends on the country, I imagine. But if in average, what's the effort that is needed to run a PEFA Climate standalone assessment? If it's possible to answer, thank you. I realized I could open my camera just now. Sorry.
Vivi, would you like to take a round of questions, or should we answer right away? Up to you.
I think you can answer right away, please.
Okay, so you saw in the examples, like for the piloting, the countries that did PEFA Climate, and I forgot to mention, and maybe I will start with that. PEFA Climate may be undertaken as a self-assessment. It was the case. So PEFA Climate, as we developed it, is developed for central government. And I'm starting with that because that's the exception. A subnational government, which is the government of the city of Chihuahua, Mexico, decided to undertake a PEFA and a PEFA climate assessment at the same time as a self-assessment. The government decided to do it. They funded their assessment. They reached out to the Secretariat for us to help in interpreting some of the elements. So Srini said that we can help in, providing quality assurance. Anybody can reach out to us for that. It means developing a concept note and sending to us, developing a report, having us making sure that it's in accordance with the assessment. What the government of Chihuahua did, they hire consultants to do the assessment. So that's one way of doing. The government decides to do it. In that case, they're self-funded and they hired consultant. There are other way of doing. It means some countries, they partnered with their development partners. And so the funding can come from development partners. The hiring would be also here, I would say, external, or it could be staff. And that was the case if we take the example from Samoa. That was the first assessment. The assessment team was composed of staff from the Technical Assistance Center from the IMF in the Pacific, World Bank staff, the Pacific Secretariat. So it means it could be technical people from institutions. It could be consultants, external. It could be government official, if so they wish. And this is why also Srini mentioned that the Secretariat would deliver and help in delivering training. In addition to raising awareness as the way we're doing today, we we may also provide a training to assessment teams when they want to undertake a PEFA assessment. That's the first part of your question. And then the second one about the efforts that are needed, it depends. Why? Because it would be the first time you would collect information pertaining to climate change. I didn't mention when you do PEFA at the same time as PEFA Climate, the PFM part is collected with PEFA. And I would say because it's not the first time the government is doing a PEFA assessment, you know, second or third time most often, well, the PFM part of it is covered. While for climate change, you may not know, and then it comes back to the coordination I was talking about, you may not know where the information is. So it may take a little bit more of time. PEFA Climate says that for us, you know, like a standalone assessment, it's like a 40 to 50 days, person days that you would need. You might need more, and you may figure out only when you undertake, and depending on the size of the country also. And we are still learning in here, but I think we are with 50. We're good to go. It's a ballpark figure. It's around 50 days for a standalone. When you do at the same time as PEFA and PEFA gender, there is economy of scale you can build on. Over.
That's very helpful to know a little bit about these amounts of work that goes into the assessment. We have two questions in the chat. Like, first one is, do we need to follow the gender, climate and traditional PEFA separately or an integrated assessment parameters? And then a second one, what are the key challenges for you in the assessment that you are carrying out?
Okay, so when we say bundle of assessment, like having the three of them, that's the decision of the government to undertake standalone, 2 or 3. So it will be the government only deciding. It happened that we received concept notes where the government decided first to undertake 3, and then after discussing further, after they saw, and then it relates to the question from Raphael, the level of efforts and maybe the readiness of the government, they decided to go for 2 only, and then drop either gender or either climate, depending on, you know, their readiness and what they know about the data collection. So that's for this. And then about the challenges, I discussed, you know, like the coordination. So again, as for PEFA, the Secretariat does not undertake any assessment. But because we are finalizing, we consulted with almost 50 individuals representing governments, development partners, and assessment teams about the challenges exactly. The government would say, well, we don't know. We discussed that in Egypt, Vivian. We may not know much about climate change. So what is it we need to do? So they are learning. And what we heard is that PEFA Climate helps in spreading the knowledge, because that's the moment the government comes together in discussing those things. Second, the data collection. Data collection is a challenge. If the institutional coordination is not in place, data collection will likely suffer from the lack of coordination, because some of the information may be somewhere and nobody knows but the specific stakeholder, and that stakeholder may not be around the table for PEFA Climate. So it's also about identifying who are the stakeholders. And this is why I mentioned the questionnaire if for SAIs also is a good starting point to see, okay, where do we stand in the matter? So it's I would say the data, like the knowledge, the data collection and the knowledge, and they go together in a sense. It's really, those are really the two first hurdles for a PEFA assessment. And then as long as I would say there is willingness That's what we saw as well, as long as in the arrangements that are in place, in a bundle of assessment, and even in a standalone, that you put around the table Ministry of Finance, which I would say is the natural counterpart for a PEFA. When you see PEFA, you think Ministry of Finance. It's a PFM tool. But when the Ministry of Finance invites around the table Ministry of Environment, Energy, and for gender, Ministry of Family, of Women, depends on, and the discussion is about all tools, it helps, in fact, in disseminating the knowledge and in disseminating the findings. So there are different things here that PEFA Climate can help, and of course PEFA to start with. So over.
Yeah. Thank you. And final question. So whether perhaps Srini would like to answer whether there's some thinking about developing some sectoral reviews, for instance, in the health sector, and what frequency do SAIs review the PMF systems, and if those are publicly available reports?
Thanks, Vivi. Great question. So on the sector side, so the PEFA was innovatively used in some places for sectors, but it's not necessarily meant exclusively for a sector assessment. A PEFA assessment report is useful for a sector PFM understanding. So they use it when they do PFM studies in sectors. They use the inputs from the treasury-led PFM systems, but it's not specifically meant. But what we have is a service delivery guidance at subnational level, which is being more and more used in sectors like, for example, health and education, to see the PFM implications on service delivery, health service delivery, and education service delivery. And we have ambitions in the PEFA Secretariat around building that further as such. So that's the first part. The second part is essentially PEFA. The frequency typically of PEFA is 3 to 4 years. 4 years recommended to be a repeat assessments as such. So it all depends on the country context, the government and the partners operating there as to how they take it forward. So maybe I can also just mention that actually to all, from my side and for PEFA Secretariat, thank all the participants and mention that please visit our all our social media channels, our website. We are very active in digital space. Please reach out in any way. And the best way, if you want to be assured of a response from PEFA Secretariat, write to services@pefa.org. And we are bound by the steering committee, which is the owners, the partners of PEFA, on a time-bound responses to all the requests that we get on the services account. With that, over to you back, Vivi.
Thank you so much. So thank you. This was a wonderful session. And for all the participants, feel free to send us some feedback. And if there's any need for follow-up with this, diving deeper into some of the aspects, so just let us know. So thank you so much. Thank you, Srini and Holy-Tiana, and thank you for all participants. And we will inform you later about the recording. Thank you. Wish you a nice day, afternoon, evening.